Hello and welcome. I'm Samia Zaidi, and I'm the Director of Educator Success at Gradient Learning, which is a nonprofit education organization led by educators that create solutions to meet the holistic needs of every child. We're really excited for this session today that will discuss the importance of one-on-one time and check-ins for students and teachers. As many of you know, educators have been searching even before the pandemic to support students' social emotional learning and really understand them as individuals so that they can better support those students academically in the classroom. Today, we want to explore how and why teachers are checking in with their students one-on-one through both digital tools and strategies in their classrooms. In particular, we'll hear more about how they're checking in through one digital reflection tool along that makes it easier for teachers to help students feel seen and understood. You can submit questions at any point throughout the session, and we will answer those questions at the end. And finally, if you're going to tweet about this, please use the hashtag #ISTELive. And with that, I'd love to introduce today's educator panelists. First, we have Danny Mata, who is the Social Studies and Design Thinking Facilitator at Lead Innovation Studio in Kansas City, Missouri. Danny, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello. Again, I'm Danny. I am a facilitator at Lead Innovation in Kansas City. This year we had, as all of you have had, kind of an odd year. We have had online, hybrid, and in person. And so mentoring is the primary reason that I came to Lead to kind of change things up. And so this year, being able to use products like Along, to do those mentoring sessions and keep that a part of what we do at Lead has been a really big part of it. And then our program is also project-based and problem-based.
Thanks. Well, we're really excited to have you here, and I'll introduce our other panelist. Laura Tallis is in her 7th year as a special education teacher at Saline Middle School in Saline, Michigan. Laura, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you, Samia. Very similar to Danny, we have had a unique year with in-person, virtual, and hybrid learning. I primarily work with students who are at risk and students who have special education services, yet are in the general education classroom most of their day. I really relied on Along and other technology tools to check in with students while we were virtual and hybrid towards the beginning of this year. And I just love them so much that I continued to use it within my practices once we came back to in-person learning, and hope to continue using them in the future as well.
Well, thank you guys both so much for joining us. We're going to transition into our panel discussion. So as I mentioned earlier, teachers and school leaders have been exploring ways to get to know their students better in order to support them academically. And in recent years, research has confirmed what any teacher will tell you. When teachers know their students, they learn better. Through the pandemic and through virtual learning, we've seen that students are really craving that one-on-one time with their teachers. And by giving them a space to feel seen and understood, we're able to build strong relationships and trust as a foundation for learning. So as we look forward to this next school year, we know that a lot of students will be facing trauma and will need to prioritize relationships, trust, and caring in addition to curriculum. To ensure that students are able to engage in the classroom this fall, we're going to have to start off on the right foot with a strong foundational trusting relationship in order to scaffold quickly into the academics. On top of all of this, students and teachers have had many overlapping crises in addition to the pandemic, from unprecedented disruptions in school, and for some, disruptions in work, racial injustice and violence, economic insecurity, and the loss of friends and loved ones. Any one of these things on their own would be devastating, but together they add up to a sustained trauma. And all of that really brings me to my first question as we dig into the importance of these one-on-one check-ins. So I'd love to start by asking you guys, why do you value check-ins through Along in your teaching? And how do you check in regularly with your students now for those one-on-one check-ins? Let's start with Danny.
Yeah, well, I think first thing is the one-on-one check-in is the game changer. Prior to coming to Lead in kind of the more traditional school I was lucky if I got to have a kid maybe more than once in class. So you were able to establish a little bit of a relationship at one time. But once that was done, it was kind of, a lot of times I didn't get to see those students again or anything like that. And so mentoring has been a way to connect with kids, stay with kids, to stay connected to them. I've been lucky. I graduated my first class this year. I've had the same 19 mentees for 4 years. And so we've really come together as a family and a group. And that one-on-one has dramatically changed the way the students in that group have been able to elevate their work. I've had several students who are, I would say, struggled in school prior to coming here, didn't have a lot of success, but through one-on-one mentoring, we got to see some amazing successes. This year I had one young man who presented not only to our principal, but also to one of our assistant superintendents about racial inequity in representation of staff in our buildings and his potential solutions and ideas. And there's no way that this young man would have been able to do that if he didn't feel the support and the connection and the attachment that's built through that one-on-one mentoring. And things like Along made it so that I could asynchronously meet with him or any of my mentees while we were in distance or while we were in hybrid learning, but at the same time, it still kept that connection. It still kept a video connection, that face-to-face connection. And truly, I think without those things, you don't get the types of products and the I guess, advancement in skills and whatnot that you're able to see when that's not really the case.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It sounds like it was really important to have not only that face-to-face connection that you get in the classroom, but also through this type of quick check-in over video, but also that having that foundational relationship with that student really allowed them to grow and be able to achieve what they might not have otherwise been able to achieve. Let's hear from you, Laura.
Sure. I think I really value one-on-one check-ins with students is because they are individualized. Every student has their own strengths and challenges that are unique to themselves. And getting to check in with them on an individual level allows me as their teacher to know exactly where they're at and to know that that changes throughout the year. And they're not always expected to be a high achieving student who's always, doing great. A lot of things can happen, throughout the year that we sometimes don't always see. And then the same goes for students that may be having trouble with something and might more typically run into challenges and roadblocks at school. One-on-one check-ins allow me to really check in with that student, hear what's going on, and on a deeper level than just, how are you doing? It's kind of like, why, getting to the why of how you're feeling, and talking a little bit more on a social emotional level, rather than just some surface level conversation. So I've really valued those throughout the years that I've done one-on-one check-ins. Something that I think really helps to get to that level with students is setting expectations for one-on-one check-ins. At the beginning of every year, my mentees and we come up with a list of expectations for each other. What do they expect to do as a mentee? And they'll say things like, well, I want to try suggestions that you give me, and I want to be open and honest. And they ask the same of me. They ask me to be an empathetic listener. They ask me to give quality suggestions and to be positive and supportive. So I think that really sets the tone for both my students and myself to really value the check-ins throughout the year.
Thank you for sharing that. It sounds like the students in your class have a lot of agency in setting up what this is going to look like for them to engage with you. They're thinking a little bit about their schedule, like when is this going to fit? They're thinking about the expectations that they're setting, and they're holding you equally accountable to you holding them accountable by setting those expectations. So it sounds like it's really a two-way street between you and your students for those one-on-one check-ins. I'm going to transition us into the next question. I want to go back to this piece around research, showing us that learning can only really happen when students are emotionally and physically safe. What do you incorporate in your check-ins to help ensure that your students feel safe and heard? And for this one, let's start with you, Laura.
Sure. Well, I always start the year by explaining to students that I am team you. I am your coach, not only your teacher throughout the year, but I get to encourage you along the way. And as your coach, I am not only celebrating the successes with you, but I'm also coaching you through challenges and roadblocks that you'll find. And we're all here to get a little bit better every day. And we can't do that unless we get feedback, and unless we work towards the things that we're having trouble with. We have someone that we can trust and talk to at school. So that is something that I will continue to bring up throughout the year. Is I'll say, like, remember, I'm team you, I'm team Hayden, or team, Sammy throughout the year. Like, I'll remind students of that so that they see that I'm always there to support and encourage them throughout the year, and that they can always come to me because they know that I'm on their side and I have their back. So I think, I've tackled some big issues with students throughout the years, and especially this year, as I had students whose parents were on the front lines, and that carried a lot of burden for them as they were scared, as we all were in this past year. So really getting to talk to them and hear what they have to say and just be a listening ear was so important to them. I also dealt with the typical academic challenges that students have as well. I had a student this year who first few weeks of school was like, Miss Tallis, I'm not good at math. I'm not going to do well in math. Like that. And she was like trying to set that expectation with me. But through our one-on-one check-ins, I could really understand why she felt so insecure about math and what I could do to help her and give her strategies to improve throughout the year. She went from struggling through her first 3 math units, and then the last 3 or 4 that we had throughout the year, she passed all of her tests and they increasingly got better. So it was just fun to celebrate that with her and for her. And then she came back to me and recognized, like, well, yeah, I can do this, and I would ask her, what are the strategies that you've learned that can help you in the future with this as well? And she could say, like, I know I have to write things down. I have to make a note card, all these little strategies that we had talked about. So it's fun to celebrate those things as well.
I love that. I love the team you aspect that you shared at the beginning, just opening that space where clearly the student felt like over time they were able to have a listener who was there for them, and somebody to also help them reflect and think about, what am I getting better at here? Like, what strategies are working for me? It sounds like you did a lot of mindset development with that student as well, because you're really there as somebody that wants them to grow and wants them to do their best. So I love that story. I'd love to hear from you, Danny. What are you thinking about here about how you make students feel safe and heard?
Sure. Well, first off, I have to echo Laura in terms of that team you aspect. I think that's the piece that the kids gravitate towards, and that that's what they're looking for. They want to know that there's somebody, not just their parents or family members or whatever outside of school, but they want to know that there is somebody in that building, in their environment, that is on their side, that is going to fight for them and do that. So I think that team you is by far kind of the foundation of that. For me, the other piece of it is just being very genuine and honest with them, and explaining, like, that my job as a mentor, or my job as sort of this facilitator, is really just to help you become 1% better every day. I give them kind of that equation of, if you just try to be 1% better than you were yesterday, then after 1 year, you're 365% better than you were the year before. And that's huge growth. And we all know that sometimes we're gonna slip and whatnot, but they know along with me that we're all in this doing the same thing. It's not that I've got something figured out and am extra special, but I'm still trying to be 1% better every day. And that helps. I also think one of the ways that's been really helpful this year, and I will give some of the credit to Along, is that with this year, students definitely react to mentoring and those one-on-one situations and those connections differently. With Along, what I liked is I could record my thought, the entry, whatever kind of question that was at the top of my mind for that student. And I could then send that to all students, just one, two, a few of the students. But because it was asynchronous, it gave the students who maybe need more time to really think about how they want to respond and how they want to do things. It gave them that time. Sometimes in that one-on-one, when you're live and sitting there, there's that pressure of you've got to have it right then, and you're trying to figure out what to say, but you don't know. Whereas like programs like Along gave those kids the opportunity to look at it, to think, to really come up with what they wanted to. And I think that creates this measure of safety as well, because they know that they're not just being put on the spot, but that they have the ability to really think through what they want to say and make sure that it is what they want to say and not just kind of what's coming out. But I think those are the keys to creating that sort of safe feeling, is giving them options and opportunities and different ways to respond to that one-on-one interaction.
Yeah, I appreciate that you called that out. I know for some students, when I used to ask them questions like, how are you doing? Or asking them questions to open up. I mean, you sometimes just get that blank face back at you. Are you here? Fine. And you can push deeper in that moment, absolutely. But having other options and ways to engage as well in those one-on-ones where they're, have some choice about how and when they respond to you, in addition to the time they have live with you in the classroom. Sounds like it was really helpful to just create more opportunities for them to engage in a way that they feel comfortable with. So thank you for sharing that addition. I'm also just walking away with Team U from both of you guys as one of the key components here. Going into our next question, I'd love to think a little bit about how now more than ever, we're hearing about inequalities and disparities in teaching and learning. The pandemic certainly brought even more of this to light. Could you discuss a little bit about how having those regular touch points with students and building stronger relationships helps to actually address some of that in the classroom level? And maybe we can start here with Danny.
Yeah, absolutely, Samia. I think what the one-on-one connections and the one-on-one check-ins and relationships do is they give a student the opportunity to fail, but do so safely. That they know that I am going to be there, and if they do fail, that I'm not just going to stand by and let them sink on their own, but that I'm going to give them tools. I'm going to try to help them out. And that really builds that sense of resilience. It builds that sense of perseverance. A lot of times that we are trying to build in our students, because that's the way the real world is. We all know we try a lot of things, we fail at a lot of things, we reflect on why we failed, and we reiterate and try again. And part of the reason that we have that is because we have the trust and support of, say, our colleagues and administrators and all of those things. Our students need that same type of feeling. And so a lot of times that's something that they've got to learn. I also think part of that is it allows that relationship for the student to be much more honest about what the real barriers are that they face when they're struggling. Because I think sometimes if you don't really have that relationship, what you get is, as you said, you're asking somebody, how are you doing? And you just got to get the fine, and that not everything is fine. And you can kind of push, but they're not feeling like being honest. But once you've established that relationship, now all of a sudden you're hearing about maybe something that's going on at home, or something that happened in the class before that really upset them, but they didn't let anyone know. You can work with them to remove the emotion from it, from coming down a little bit, and being able to take those steps forward. And to me, those are the ways that we can kind of push back and get through the inequities and the disparities that are created just kind of inherently in teaching and learning and the systems that we have.
Thank you for sharing that. Let's hear from you, Laura.
Yeah, so I really used Along and other check-in tools to build equity in my classroom. Every student is unique and has their own lived experiences. So as an educator, it's really important to me that I respect that everybody is unique and has their own lived experiences, and which means that I have to treat everyone with an individual lens to make sure that I'm supporting them in the best way possible. One-on-one check-ins really allows me to do that because I can hear from them in an honest and authentic way. And I think kind of piggybacking off of what Danny said, where it gives them time to really like think and reflect about what they want to share and what really is important to them. I think not only does it help them to understand themselves, but it helps me understand them as well. And as a middle school educator, middle schoolers are very concerned about what others think of them, especially their peers. So having a one-on-one check-in, I see Danny smiling over there. He's like, yeah. Having a one-on-one check-in eliminates that peer pressure that we know is so can be a barrier for a lot of middle school students. So I just think that that's so important because they're working against themselves and not against their peers. So it just feels like it really kind of like levels things out and gives me an opportunity to support each of my students individually. I also share with my students that I'm like, I don't know everything. You know, I think I've heard Danny say this before, but he says, I'll never know more than Google. And I agree. I will never know more than Google. I will never be an expert in every field, but I have the tools and I have the contacts to have you reach out, have a student reach out to someone that they need to, or, you know, to try a new strategy when one doesn't work.
I love that. I will never be smarter than Google. Yeah, it sounds like across both of your guys' thoughts here, just really like leading into this idea of mindset development for students. And like over time, we're helping them build that growth mindset and seeing sort of what are each of the little things that I'm doing to lead towards more success over time. But that with that, it really takes consistency and showing up for these one-on-one check-ins. I think like a theme I'm just hearing across both of you is you have to build that strong foundation of trust. And you can't build that if you're not consistently showing up and having those touch points with students where it's really about them, their development, and really learning about them as individuals. So I know you guys didn't even say it explicitly, you know, how often you're checking in, but it sounds like there's just a real consistency here in students knowing that they can rely on you to check in with them and to follow up so that they can have spaces to fail safely. They can focus on that growth mindset and development. And you guys both modeling for them some of that growth mindset and vulnerability that like, I don't have all the answers, but I'm here to listen and I'm here to support you. So can't fix everything in the classroom with like the answer, but we can offer those strategies. And it sounds like that's one of the ways that both of you guys are really thinking about one-on-one check-ins with your students. So with that, I'd actually love to kind of close out with a question for each of you. What do you hope that students walk away with after they've had a mentoring session, a virtual check-in with you one-on-one? What is something that you hope they walk away with? And maybe Laura, you can close us out here with the first answer, and then we'll go to Danny.
Sure. Well, I really want my students to know after every check-in that being you is beautiful and having your own individuality is something that's so wonderful. And I'm really grateful to be able to experience each of my students individually with one-on-one check-ins. And I think that they walk away learning more about themselves and learning how to celebrate their strengths. And also just feeling more confident to tackle anything that has been challenging for them. Everybody has something that is difficult. And we talk a lot about that in one-on-one check-ins, that it's okay to fail. It's okay to try again. As long as you keep trying, that's what's really important. And my students know that they can rely on me. We have weekly check-ins. They can always request a check-in, and reach out to me in other ways. So those are just the ways that I think it's really fun to get to celebrate everyone as a unique individual, because as teachers, we love having all of that, all different, the diversity in our classrooms. So the more we get to see it and the more we get to celebrate each one and each student individually, the more exciting it is for us to come to work every day.
Yeah,
love that.
I would
Go ahead, Dan.
totally agree with that. Sorry, Samia. I would totally agree with that. I think that confidence and that that celebration is a big part of it. And as you mentioned a little bit earlier, and Laura just mentioned, that consistency, and we're the same. We meet weekly. I meet with all of my mentees every single day in terms of I have them in class, but we spend a good amount of time talking once a week, at least once a week, if not more. And so that consistency is there. And I think one of the other big pieces of the one-on-one check-in, that connection, is it gives the student that feeling that they've been heard. Like, that's what I want my kids to feel like when we have finished a one-on-one check-in, or we've even done a long posting, is that I have listened, that they have been heard, that they have been valued as a person, that their ideas are not just quote unquote childish, or that their ideas aren't valid, because they're just as valid, and helping them realize and giving them that sense of, yes, what you have to say is important. Yes, what you have to say is something that people need to hear, and I'm going to be there and listen. And when you have that run-in with a peer, or you have that run-in with another teacher or an administrator, or whatever that is, I'm not jumping up and just saying, okay, you're completely right, but I'm there to listen to you, to hear your side, to help make sure that your side of that story, or whatever that situation is heard and communicated in a way that is hopefully accurate. And I think those are the things that build that confidence, and those connections really then are what give the students the ability to push boundaries, to feel safe in failing, and to really do what ultimately we want them to do, and be creative, be unique, be individuals, and continue to progress and move forward.
Listening to you both, I think I'm just want to be a student in your classrooms. That is wonderful. I want to have a one-on-one check-in with each of you and feel heard and valued and seen. So thank you both so much for your contributions today. I want to just thank you for a rich discussion, and to everyone for joining us today. If you have any questions, please submit them and we'll be happy to answer them. But thank you all so much for your participation. Just really, really appreciate you guys joining and sharing a little bit more of a lens into your classrooms and the importance of those one-on-one check-ins.
Thank you.
Thank you.